Should we start to panic as Milan fans? Probably not. I think with 2 games in, I feel like it's still very early to jump to conclusions. But with this game and how the approach was set up, it was all wrong. And I feel like you can start off with Loftus Cheek at the 10. And when you looked at the lineup, right, obviously, you had your Mike Magnons and your Teos, your Tomoris. We got to see Pavlovic in there. And of course, you saw Davide Calabria in there, but of course, he's always going to start because he's the captain. But when you look at it going forward, right, in terms of, attacking wise, you had your Reinders, you had your Musa, like how I predicted, but then you saw Loftus Cheek. And that's where kind of the question marks started to arise because in the preseason, we saw Fonseca really implement that number 10 and have an emphasis on that number 10 position, how it's going to be the most crucial in, the attacking phase and everything like that. But then when you have a profile like Loftus Cheek, who's a box to box midfielder, not really great with his back to goal and kind of on the half turn a little bit, he was never gonna get the best out of Loftus Cheek in that position, and I feel like we really struggled in that attacking phase having someone like Loftus Cheek in those types of profiles. So I was wondering why Fonseca was so quick to kind of go against his philosophy when the whole preseason that's what we were working with. That's what we were kind of working around to kind of make this work. And he changed it. So I was really kind of upset with that he was just so quick to kind of change on the flip of a dime because we didn't get a great result versus Torino in match day 1. And going forward, I think it's more clear than not that Loftus Cheek can't play in this position. It's not his best position. He's clearly a box to box midfielder. I mean the game that kind of pops into my mind as the perfect Loftus Cheek game was against versus PSG in the Champions League, right? And I mean we saw Loftus Cheek probably play his best game in a Milan shirt that game. I feel like he was the most effective going forward, kind of breaking the lines and stuff like that. And it was very encouraging to see. But then when you have Loftus Cheek playing this sort of position where he's not really that comfortable in, and we kind of knew that this isn't his best position, we really struggled in the attacking phase. And I mean, I think, kind of our goals and everything like that kind of was a reflection of that as well. And Fonseca, I think, making poor choices with us playing such a high line and not reading the game at all to make those proper changes that would help us out the most. And Padma constantly, I mean, I'll tip my hat to Padma because Padma played an absolute sensational game. And I feel like their passing, their movement, and their chance creation was phenomenal. I think they played spectacular. So I want to tip my hat to Parma, number one, because they outplayed us for sure. But going back on Fonseca's poor choices, he was playing such a high line, and all Parma had to do was just hit us on that counter attack, and they did that constantly. And the most dangerous chances that they created turned into goals. And I feel like Parma just took advantage of that system because we weren't really changing that style of play. We still played that high line, and I mean, we saw how many times Pavlovic kind of run to players that kind of beat him with that over the top through ball. We saw constantly, and we struggled to defend against that. And you start to ask questions about guys like Teo when you could maybe point fingers that he was responsible for the second goal, most importantly, because you see Pavlovic kind of in the defense, right? But then you see Teo just chilling, just walking back, not really doing anything crazy to kind of get back and help out the defense. So maybe you can start pointing fingers at Teo, but when you see Teo doing this, it's very unencouraging. And I mean, this whole game, I feel like with a weapon like Teo that we have to really get the most out of, he was absent this game. And I feel like it was more clear than not that we did struggle not only in the offensive phase where Teo really, in my opinion, thrives the most in that offensive phase, but defensively as well, he really wasn't doing anything spectacular either. So I think maybe you could start pointing fingers at Teo, but going forward, I feel like it's not even just a Teo problem. It's also that whole right side, right? Against Torino, right? Both of those goals that we conceded against were on that right side. In this match as well, it was on the right hand side. So I feel like going forward, yeah, we put in Emerson, and I mean he did better than Calabria, but it's like that's not saying much, right? Because even then, Emerson really didn't do anything spectacular. Okay, I get it. It's like his first, couple minutes in a Milan shirt, kind of in a strange situation just to throw him on like that. But going forward, I feel like maybe you need to start asking questions about Calabria because Calabria in these last two games, you can argue these last four goals that we've conceded were kind of on him. And I feel like going forward, we need to start asking these uncomfortable conversations. Is Calabria going to be a starter? Is he going to be on the bench? Is he just going to be sold? We're not really sure. So I feel like going forward, maybe you just have to firm it and, throw Emerson in there. But then you start to say, okay, we literally had a perfect option in Kalulu and we sold Kalulu, or rather, we loaned him out, but we had a perfectly good option in Kalulu. Maybe, you start to, blame the management. Oh, why did you sell this when we had a perfectly good option? But dwelling on the past and kind of dwelling on decisions that we made isn't going to help the situation. It's about finding solutions with the pool of players we have right now. Now, I think the whole kind of headline in this game was the whole Rafael Leao situation. And, he put out on Twitter a whole state, or not on Twitter, on Instagram, a whole statement and everything like that, how it was just directed towards one person who was kind of saying some negative things. And honestly, with what Rafael Leao has given to the club and how he's most definitely been our most influential player in terms of kind of bringing this sort of talent to a club like Milan. He's been our most important player in the last decade in terms of kind of what he brings to Milan, right? We never really get players like Leao at Milan. So the fact that a lot of the fan base, especially on Twitter, have been, just throwing so much hate and just really nasty comments at Leao isn't fair because this loss isn't on Rafael Leao. Yeah, sure, he made a poor pass that kind of led to Parma's second goal, but even then, he shouldn't be the one that gets slaughtered for, having, a poor mistake because every professional makes a mistake, but it's how you kind of come back from it. And in my opinion, I don't think Rafa had a bad game. Yeah, sure, he kind of made some poor decisions and, that led to the goal that we conceded on the other end. But in terms of how we created the first goal, that little 1-2 with Teo, and then he finds Pulisic in the middle of the box, it was sensational how he dribbled through two players like that. So that's what Rafael Leao gives you in moments like this. Yeah, sure, maybe you could have asked for a little bit more considering the opposition we were playing against, which was Parma. But Parma, in hindsight, right, in this match, if just not even looking at it on paper, Parma played sensational. And I feel like it's not fair how a lot of the fans on Twitter have been slaughtering Leao, acting like this was his fault. But let's move on to the good news that was in the match, which was obviously the goal. I feel like Pulisic took his goal well. He got his first goal of the season, and I think this will be great, obviously, for his confidence going forward in the season because he had a great season last year. And I think if he can kind of capitalize on opportunities like this, I feel like it'll just be better for him going forward. And maybe you start to ask questions on where his best position is, whether it's the number 10 or on that right wing. I think regardless of where Pulisic is, he's going to give you a good output on wherever he is on the pitch. So, but I think probably the standout was Pavlovic. I feel like going from Malik Tiao to Pavlovic, I feel like was a breath of fresh air because Pavlovic was so aggressive, so stuck on his man, and he had a lot of really good tackles, a lot of like goal preventing tackles in this match. And I feel like that is something that Pavlovic is going to give you, those aggressive tackles, that aggressive kind of defensive style of play. And someone like Malik Tiao or Gabia isn't going to give you that. So I think going forward, I feel like that defensive partnership, that center back partnership with Tomori has to be Strahinja Pavlovic. So for me, spoiler alert, Pavlovic is going to be the man of the match. And I mean, it's hard to kind of not give him that when he was in all the newspapers and everything like that. He was the highest rated for Milan. And I mean, hands down, he was. And I can't wait to see Pavlovic in a Milan shirt going forward. So let's go to tops and flops. So like I said, with the top, I'm going to say Strahinja Pavlovic for the reasons why I said previously. And the flop of the match, once again, we're going back to back. Davide Calabria. I feel like once again, like I said, it was the two goals that we conceded against Torino were on that right hand side because of Calabria. And I feel like in this game versus Parma, he really didn't do anything either. And both of the Parma goals were on that right hand side because of Davide Calabria. His recovery speed isn't there, right? I was telling my friend the other day that Calabria's peak was under Gattuso, right? When he was, a lot younger, obviously. I mean, we're talking a long time ago, right? 2018. That was when Gattuso was coach. So we're talking about a way different Calabria then and now, and it's crazy to see his decline as a right back. And I mean, it's these last two games, and I mean, like I said earlier in the video, it's match day two, so you can't really jump to conclusions. But then when you see a guy like Calabria drop two back-to-back stinkers, we conceded 4 goals in 2 games. That's horrible, right? I think it's justified that Calabria is the flop of the match for sure. So my hopes for next game and the improvements I want to see be made within the time period of obviously the game versus Parma to our next match versus Lazio, which we'll get to later. I want to see some defensive improvements, right? We cannot go into these games playing a high line because our ability to prevent counterattacks is just not there, right? We do not have the recovery ability to kind of get back into the defensive positions to stop chances from being created for the other team. And I mean, it's more clear than not, especially in this game, because Parma just did over the top through balls. Or if you really want to score against Milan, go on that right hand side. That's how you are going to score against AC Milan. If you go through that right hand side and, either do a little through ball, kind of how Parma scored both of their goals, or over the top through balls. We cannot play a high line. So I feel like going forward, I don't really want to see that going, into these next couple games in terms of attacking football. I want to see Pulisic return to that number 10 position. I don't want to give up on this, trident of Leao, Pulisic, and Chukwueze. And I feel like, yeah, sure, Chukwueze didn't really do all that much versus Torino, but I think he did a lot better than what Loftus-Cheek did at the 10 rather than, putting Pulisic on the right. Getting the best out of this team is super important. Having Pulisic at that 10 is crucial. Maybe, I commented on one of our posts putting Librali in there. I don't know if that's such a crazy thought process, right, to throw in Librali in there. I feel like preseason showed a lot of great things. So either if it's Librali or Pulisic, I'd be 100% okay with that. And also with how phenomenal Tijani Reinders is, right? I said in my season predictions that he was going to be the most kind of MVP of the season. And I mean, 2 back-to-back games, right? He came on as a sub versus Torino and he just turned the game on his head. I feel like he had a lot of great moments in this Parma match as well. So going forward, I want to see in that double pivot Tijani Reinders and Yusuf Fofana. I really want to see Fofana, from start to finish. And we saw a little bit of him in this match, and he seems like a motivator in this team, right? He seems very motivated in this team to kind of get the best out of like a lot of guys. Like I saw him, patting Leao in the back and stuff like that. And I feel like it's great to have someone like that on the pitch, right? In the locker room, obviously it's very positive to have that, but on the pitch, I feel like it's super important because I think much like myself and a lot of you guys out there, when you play football, you want to have someone who motivates you on the pitch, rather not just a coach, but a teammate as well on the pitch to motivate you as well. And I feel like Fofana is going to maybe play that role. So going forward, I want to see Pulisic at the 10, Reinders and Fofana in that double pivot, and obviously Chukwueze on the right. And I think the main kind of question marks because of this Morata injury is the striker position, because Okafor was kind of ghosting this game. I mean, yeah, he had a couple opportunities that he probably should have put away, but shout out to Football Kush. He made a great point that we really don't know where Okafor's best position is, right? We get the best out of him when he comes off of the bench, but that's because, when the opposition is defending in such a way where a profile like Okafor comes in, he starts to become a little bit unpredictable. So you don't really know what kind of moves and runs he's going to make. Whereas when you start him from minute one, you kind of know what runs he's going to make or kind of what decisions he's going to have going forward in that attacking position. So then you start to ask questions: who's going to be our number 9? Is Jovic going to be the right guy until Morata comes back? Is Okafor kind of going to get another chance? Not really sure. Me personally, I want to see Okafor get that chance again. So let's preview our next game versus Lazio. So Lazio kind of have had a inconsistent start of the season, right? They beat Venezia 3-1, but then they lost to a 10-man Udinese side away. So obviously we're playing them in Rome, so it's going to be a tough game. I feel like a game versus Lazio is always tough. It's always hard to kind of play Lazio, and I feel like sometimes we struggle, but then sometimes, we actually play well. And I feel like this is going to be one of those games where we play well, but we just can't get it over the line. So that's why I feel like I'm going to predict a draw, because Lazio is a strong team, in my opinion. I feel like Lazio is a good team. Yeah, sure, they get kind of low, like in the table, right around that 7th, 8th place mark, but I feel like in terms of quality, I feel like they have those players that can really turn a game on its head, right? They have got the likes of Zaccagni, Tati Castellanos as well. So I feel like they got, some protagonists in their team as well. So I'm going to predict a 1-1 draw. I still don't think that we're going to get our first win of the season yet. And I feel like with this kind of Fonseca system, it's going to take a while for it to be implemented. Again, hope I'm wrong. I hope we beat Lazio, right? I hope that we can kind of get the ball rolling towards the start of the season. But then after this Lazio game is an international break. So then, Fonseca can start to, kind of piece things together with his team and so forth. So I feel like it'll be really important what this Lazio game kind of tells us going forward. So I think we're gonna learn a lot in this game, especially because it's a top class opposition. So I feel like I'm excited. It's kind of the first big game of the season, I guess you can say. So that's why I'm gonna predict a 1-1 draw. Yeah, match day 2 kind of didn't go as much as a lot of us hoped, right? I predicted a 2-0, but it didn't go that way. But let me know what you guys have to think in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao ragazzi.